The Puckle Gun, also known as the defense gun, was a primitive crew-served, manually operated flintlock revolver patented in 1718 by James Puckle, 1667–1724, a British inventor, lawyer, and writer. It was one of the earliest weapons to be referred to as a machine gun, being called such in a 1722 shipping manifest. However, the Puckle gun was never used during any combat operation or war. Production was highly limited and may have been as few as 2 guns. Design and patent. The Puckle gun is a tripod-mounted, single-barreled flintlock weapon fitted with a manually operated revolving cylinder. Puckle advertised its main application as an anti-boarding gun for use on ships. The barrel was 3 feet, 0.91 m, long with a bore of 1.25 inches, 32 mm. The cylinder held 6 to 11 shots depending on configuration, and was hand-loaded with powder and shot while detached from the weapon. According to the Patent Office of the United Kingdom, in the reign of Queen Anne, the law officers of the Crown established as a condition of grant that the patentee must by an instrument in writing describe and ascertain the nature of the invention and the manner in which it is to be performed. This gun's patent, number 418 of 1718, was one of the first to provide such a description. T.W. Lee remarked, however, that James Puckle's patent in 1718 contains more rhetorical fervor than technical rigor. 2 versions. Puckle demonstrated 2 configurations of the basic design: 1, intended for use against Christian enemies, fired conventional round bullets, while the second, designed to be used against the Muslim Turks, fired square bullets. The square bullets were considered to be more damaging. They would, according to the patent, convince the Turks of the benefits of Christian civilization. The weapon was also reported as able to fire shot, with each discharge containing 16 musket balls. Operation. The Puckle gun was fired in a similar fashion to a conventional flintlock musket. However, after each shot, a crank on the threaded shaft at the rear would be unscrewed to release the cylinder to turn freely. The cylinder would then be advanced by hand to the next chamber, and the crank turned back again to lock the cylinder into the breech of the fixed barrel. The flintlock mechanism could then be primed for another shot. It was triggered using a lever which was separate from the crank assembly. To reload the weapon, the crank handle could be unscrewed completely to remove the cylinder, which could then be replaced with a fresh one. In this way it was similar to earlier breech-loading swivel guns with a detachable chamber which could be loaded prior to use. The cylinder appears to have been referred to as a charger in contemporary documentation. Production and use. A prototype was shown in 1717 to the English Board of Ordnance, who were not impressed. At a later public trial held in 1722, a Puckle gun was able to fire 63 shots in 7 minutes, approximate 9 rounds per minute, in the midst of a driving rainstorm. A rate of 9 rounds per minute compared favorably to musketeers of the period, who could be expected to fire between 2 and 5 rounds per minute depending on the quality of the troops, with experienced troops expected to reliably manage 3 rounds a minute under fair conditions. It was however inferior in fire rate to earlier repeating weapons such as the Calth repeater, which fired up to 6 times faster. The Puckle gun drew few investors and never achieved mass production or sales to the British Armed Forces. As with other designs of the time, it was hampered by clumsy and undependable flintlock ignition and other mechanical problems. A leaflet of the period sarcastically observed of the venture that "they're only wounded who hold shares therein." Production was highly limited and may have been as few as just 2 guns, one a crude prototype made of iron, the other a finished weapon made from brass. John Montague, 2nd Duke of Montague, Master General of the Ordnance, 1740–1749, purchased 2 guns for an ill-fated expedition in 1722 to capture St. Lucia and St. Vincent. While shipping manifests state 2 machine guns of Puckle's, sic, were among the cargo that departed from Portsmouth, there is no evidence that the guns were ever used in battle. Surviving examples. 2 original examples are on display at former Montague homes, one at Boughton House and another at Beaulieu Palace. There is a replica of a Puckle gun at Buckler's Hard Maritime Museum in Hampshire. Blackmore's British Military Firearms 1650-1850 lists Puckle's brass gun in the Tower of London as illustration 77, though this appears to have been a gun belonging to the former Montague estate, at that point owned by the Buccleuch family, on loan to the Tower at the time. Similar guns. Collier revolver. Elisha Collier invented a flintlock revolver in 1814, nearly 100 years after the Puckle gun, though examples of flintlock and matchlock revolvers exist much earlier, with the earliest known dating back to the 15th century. Unlike the Puckle, the cylinder of the Collier was not interchangeable, slowing reloading, but would have had a faster rate of fire for its 5 chambers due to the integral cylinder advancing of its single-action revolver mechanism, self-priming mechanism, and the lack of a need to screw and unscrew the cylinder between shots. Remington pattern revolvers. During the period between the widespread adoption of the revolver, but prior to widespread use of cartridges, a common method of increasing reload speed was to replace a revolver's entire cylinder with another preloaded one, similar to the Puckle gun. This practice was primarily done on Remington revolvers, as their cylinders were easily removable and were held by a cylinder pin, unlike the early Colt revolvers which were held together by a wedge that went through the cylinder pin. Confederate revolving cannon. A single example of a 2-inch bore, 5-shot revolver cannon was built and used by the Confederate States of America during the Siege of Petersburg. It was captured on April 27, 1865 by Union troops and sent for examination to the United States Military Academy at West Point, New York.
Please subscribe and thanks for watching.